The house was quiet, wrapped in the soft hum of the evening, shadows stretching as daylight dimmed. I settled into my favorite armchair by the window, the familiar creak beneath me a small comfort in the stillness. Outside, the streetlights flickered unevenly, casting wavering glimmers on the garden where once vibrant roses now sagged with neglect. The light in the windows shimmered weakly, almost fragile, as if mirroring the heaviness stealing over my heart. My eyes drifted to a faded photograph resting on the side table, a sepia memory of a time when life was simpler. David's young smile was bright and untarnished by the years to come. Clara wasn't there, not yet. How oddly she had crept into our lives, wrapped in a facade of care and kindness. I believed in her, trusted her like family. But lately, something had shifted. Subtle changes unfolded, so quiet I nearly missed them. The medications Clara brought were supposed to be my safety net, but a fogginess settled in my mind, thoughts slipping away, moments lost like wisps of smoke. I blamed age, dismissed the worries that crept in. Yet beneath those doubts, a quiet stir of suspicion began to grow. The first sign appeared on a morning when I forgot to water the plants, such a small act, once as natural as breathing. I stared at dry pots, confusion flickering in my chest, but I told myself to stay calm, to pay attention. In the days that followed, my mind wobbled uncertainly. Faces blurred, conversations became faint echoes. It was disorienting, heart-aching in its quiet assault. Then I caught sight of Clara's hands, quick, efficient, swapping my pill bottle with one that looked the same but wasn't. I watched her from across the room, noting how her eyes slid past me, never meeting mine. Her smile was polite, but hollow. Nights grew colder. Rest eluded me, the silence of my room pressing so heavily it felt suffocating. The ticking clock marked time like a relentless judge. Was I really slipping away, as everyone feared? Or was this cloud of confusion something more sinister, hidden beneath a family's veneer of normalcy? One afternoon, as Clara refilled my pill box, clarity struck sharply. Dosages smaller than prescribed, pills missing without explanation. My hands trembled as I compared her versions to the doctor's notes. The betrayal unfolded plainly before me. The woman I helped foster, trusted with my care, was undoing me piece by piece. I sat at the kitchen table, palms pressed together, heart heavy with sorrow. Years of shared meals, laughter, and quiet moments now seemed fragile, their edges chipped by deceit. The house, once warm and welcoming, felt suddenly cold, shadows lengthened by lies that wrapped around every corner. I thought of David, his gentle nature, his blindness to the danger in his own home. How could I shield him from this treachery? But deep beneath the pain, a small fire ignited, a promise born in silence, strength waiting to rise. Everyday actions turned precarious. Taking my medication felt like traversing a hidden maze filled with unseen traps. The pills themselves transformed from tokens of healing to symbols of control. Even the air around me seemed heavier, burdened with untold truths. With trembling hands, I folded Clara's careless prescription papers, the stark evidence in ink impossible to ignore. The betrayal was real, sharp enough to break the fragile shell I'd built. The woman who vowed care had chosen manipulation. Yet in that vulnerable moment, calm washed over me. The storm had come, but I was no longer passive. Beneath my quiet surface, resolve surged, ready to reclaim what was mine, not with noise or fury, but with the sharp patience of one who endured far worse. The evening deepened, cloaking the house in velvety dark. I settled back, letting the gathering silence shield me. In that silence, I heard the first whisper of my strength, a faint spark flickering in the dim light. Even when shadows loom, light remains, waiting for its moment to blaze. The next days passed in a quiet haze, as if I were walking beneath a glass dome that muffled sounds and sharpened every shadow. I did not shout, I did not cry. Instead, I retreated into a silence so complete it almost felt like a shield, thickening between me and the world. The anger that could have erupted like wildfire simmered in my chest, but I held it close, letting it settle into a low, steady flame. There was no need for noise. My mind was already racing, quietly building a fortress. In the stillness, my thoughts wandered back through decades of sacrifice. I remembered the early years raising David by myself, how I had worked tirelessly, balancing jobs and late nights just to ensure he never wanted for anything but love. Every early morning, every missed sleep was etched into the quiet lines of my face. I had watched him grow with fierce pride and gentle hope. Then Clara came into our lives, a nurse full of promise, driven by ambition. I had welcomed her, a mother extending her hand to another generation, eager to share my wisdom and support her dreams. But support had been twisted into something else. I recalled the conversations, the smiles I offered without suspicion, the times I encouraged Clara's career choices, even helped when she needed a reference or advice. How blind had I been? How had I failed so profoundly to see the cracks beneath those carefully constructed smiles? Yet, amid these memories, I found no room for despair, only a deepening resolve. The betrayal felt like a weight, yes, but also a challenge laid before me. I did not want a battle fought with rage or accusation. Instead, I sought to wield patience, a weapon honed over 72 years of life. The quiet strength that had carried me through loss, grief, and hardship whispered now in my ear, "Strength is found in silence." I let the mantra settle into my bones, repeating it whenever doubt tried to creep in. My strategy was not to confront Clara directly, not yet. That would only alert her, make her tighten the webs around me. Instead, I chose to observe, to gather, to understand. I would learn her patterns, her movements, the subtle ways she masked her true intentions. At times, I caught myself smiling silently at how mistaken everyone was. The world saw me as fragile, an aging woman likely to fade quietly into the background. But beneath the soft skin and wrinkled hands beat the heart of a mother who knew exactly how to protect her own. I was no longer the child relying on others' mercy, but a matriarch reclaiming her dignity with calm precision. Night after night, I revisited old photographs and letters tucked away in drawers, reminders of my life's tapestry woven with love and hardship. Pages yellowed with time told stories of battles won and losses mourned. Each memory fed my quiet fire, reinforcing the path I had chosen: patience before action, knowledge before accusation. With every passing day, I learned to listen not only to my surroundings, but also to the silence within, the spaces between words, the pauses that said so much more than spoken phrases. Clara's phone calls, the supply runs she claimed were urgent, the hurried way she averted her eyes, all invited scrutiny. I cataloged these observations in a small notebook, a silent testimony of unspoken truths. At times, loneliness pressed in. Even the closest family ties felt fragile, stretched by secrets and half-truths. David, oblivious and loving, called often, but never voiced the suspicions I harbored. I protected him from the storm unfolding beneath his roof, just as I had once shielded him from the world's harshness when he was a boy. My love remained a constant undercurrent, steady and unyielding. I also reflected on the deeper pain, the subtle betrayal wrapped in Clara's entitlement, the greed that corrupted the trust I had placed in her so blindly. It was more than just lost pills or altered prescriptions. It was a theft of respect, a quiet undermining of the life I had built. This bitterness fueled my resolve, but did not poison my heart. I reminded myself that revenge was not a rush, but a careful unfolding, a silent echo meant to reclaim not only what was taken, but also the dignity denied. I could not afford rashness. Relentless patience would be my ally, observation my instrument. Every day began the same, rising with the sun, moving through my routine with deliberate attention. I documented the pills Clara offered me, noting every difference, every hesitation. My memory sharpened. I would not allow fog or confusion to betray me. I reviewed old medical records, searching for clarity amid the fog she had created. As the fog lifted, so grew my certainty. Most important, I began to quietly prepare for the future. I considered places I might stay, people I might trust, the legal avenues I could pursue. The life insurance policy I'd long known about, a secret held between my late husband and me, became a beacon of security in my thoughts, a hidden strength waiting to be unlocked. When the phone rang with a familiar voice, I hid nothing, but kept the darkness at bay. To David, I sounded calm, composed. To Clara, I appeared compliant, even vulnerable. But beneath the surface, I was no longer the woman uncertain of her fate. I was a mother who had seen the real game being played, not with tantrums, but with quiet resilience. Sometimes, as night deepened and the house settled around me, I whispered again to the shadows, "Strength is found in silence." It became my shield against despair, my mantra against defeat. The silence was no longer empty, but filled with a steady heartbeat, mine. In this silence, I was no longer the victim of betrayal. I was a sovereign reclaiming her kingdom, a mother preparing to deliver the quietest but most devastating of justice. The path ahead was long, but I would walk it unhurried, armed with patience and clarity. The house slept around me, unaware that its walls had quietly become a battleground for a silent war. In the depths of my calm, I was already planning, already watching, already waiting. The storm yet to come would be met not with screams, but with the unyielding strength forged in silence. In the days that followed, I settled into a rhythm, one that transformed the quiet corners of my home into my observatory. Each glance, every gesture from Clara carefully catalogued. My senses seemed sharper, attuned not just to what was said, but to the spaces between words, the hesitation in her voice, the flicker in her eyes when she thought I wasn't paying attention. It was a dance of shadows and whispers, but I was no longer the passive observer. I was steering the course beneath the surface. My documentation began with simple notes. Each morning, I carefully recorded the exact pills Clara provided, their quantity, color, and markings. I'd learned to identify the slightest variation, a replaced bottle, a missing pill, an altered label. My notebook, plain yet precious, became my silent archive of truth. As the weeks passed, this collection grew into a testament, a narrative built not of accusations, but of facts, steady and undeniable. I returned to the doctor's office, repeating the story of confusion about my medications, careful not to reveal my suspicions, but enough to rouse concern. The physician, familiar and dependable, reviewed my records with measured attention. His face was kind but guarded when I noted contradictions between recent prescriptions and what I was actually taking at home. He promised to double-check pharmacy records, a quiet ripple of doubt that would soon reach places I could not. Meanwhile, my old friend Sophia, a lawyer with a sharp mind and a steady hand, became my quiet confidant. Our conversations were guarded, wrapped in decades of friendship and shared resilience, tempered by the secrecy our present circumstances demanded. I presented her with the dossier I compiled, pill schedules, altered prescriptions, notes on Clara's suspicious behavior. Her expression hardened as she absorbed the facts, but offered steady reassurance. "The law can protect you, Evelyn," she said softly one afternoon in her office, the faint scent of old books and leather a familiar comfort. "But these things have to be handled carefully. The wrong move could jeopardize everything. Patience and precision are your greatest allies now." Her words rang deep and true. I vowed to be deliberate, to build my case with quiet strength, one that Clara would never anticipate coming. At home, Clara's composure began to falter. It was subtle at first, a glance held too long, a sigh when she thought no one was listening, hurried excuses for errands. I could feel her unease like a taut wire, thinning but not broken. The veil of control she wore so well started to slip in unseen moments when she thought the house was empty or my attention elsewhere. My confidence grew with every piece that lined up. I found new purpose in my observations, reminding myself that strength was forged not in rashness, but in patient gathering of evidence and resolve. I was no longer the woman who feared loss. I was the architect of my own reckoning. One afternoon, while Clara spoke on the phone with my son David, I stood quietly in the doorway, absorbing their exchange like a silent sentinel. Clara's lines were polished, rehearsed, concern masked ambition. There was no warmth, only a calculated tone, and hearing that struck me with a bitter clarity. Yet even this cruelty would be met with the calm precision I was cultivating. I kept my routines as normal as possible, nothing to arouse suspicion in Clara or David. They still saw the image I allowed, a frail, aging mother, compliant and serene. But they did not know that behind my composed smile, a storm brewed, patient and fierce. Late nights were my sanctuary. I pored over medical documents and legal records, guided by Sophia's insights. We spoke of the insurance policy that I'd long carefully guarded, a safety net established quietly with my late husband's foresight, a beacon of hope and power now legitimized in my hands. Alongside that, I visited the deeds and wills silently tucked away, familiarizing myself with the complexities Clara hoped to erase or claim. Preparing for what might come, I began to collect the symbols of my past, packing them in secret. Cherished letters from my husband, weathered photographs of happier times, delicate china passed down through generations. Each item carefully boxed was a declaration, a promise that my past, my dignity, and my future would not be taken without a fight. As weeks turned into months, I watched Clara's anxiety deepen. Her careful mask showed cracks, the nervous pacing, the quickened breath whenever I entered a room, the way her hands trembled briefly when she thought I wasn't watching. She did not know my gaze was constant, my patience unbowed. The web she spun was tightening, but this time it was around her. David's devotion remained unwavering, yet visibly strained. His brows furrowed in confusion, his once calm presence edged with worry. I promised myself I would shield him from the ugliness until the moment was right. He needed truth, but only when it would bring his peace, not his torment. The house, once a serene refuge, pulsed with tension, a battlefield cloaked in everyday domesticity. But I did not fear it. Every day of patient observation fortified me. I saw how power could lie in invisibility, and how seeming frailty could be the perfect guise for the strongest will. Liberation was not found in confrontation, but in control, in the mastery of one's own fate. I learned Clara's habits like the lines of a carefully memorized poem. I anticipated her moves, when she would check the medicine cabinets, the times she slipped glances toward my private papers, the moments she hurried past rooms as if to avoid some reckoning. Each action was a thread I patiently wound tighter into the web of my plan. Some nights I stood before the mirror and met Clara's reflection. Her eyes, meeting mine across the glass, flickered uneasily when caught. It was a duel without words, a silent battle of wills. I held her gaze steady and unflinching. The flicker deepened into something like fear. Power, I realized, existed in the spaces others overlooked. It was in invisibility, in patience, in a will that never faltered. I found strength not in shouts or storms, but in steady, unyielding resolve. In countless quiet moments, I repeated my mantra. Strength is found in silence. It was not just a phrase, but a shield and a sword. The silence was filled with a heartbeat, steadfast, deliberate, mine. The house had become more than walls and memories. It was a fortress and a theater for a quiet revolution. Every creak, every shadow told a story of battles fought and won unseen. With every day, the web pulled tighter around deceit, while my spirit rose patiently, persistently, unbroken. The hour of reckoning was near, and I would meet it with the quiet force of a mother who had endured betrayal but refused to be undone. With purpose woven into every breath, I began the delicate task of executing the plan I had so painstakingly crafted. No longer content to merely observe, I stepped beyond shadows toward the light of action. Each movement was deliberate, each conversation measured, and every detail accounted for. The first step was reclaiming control over my medical care. I requested an appointment with my doctor. Not as a frail patient, but as a woman determined to understand the truth of her own health. When I arrived, the sterile atmosphere of the clinic felt less intimidating than it had before. The clinical lights no longer cast cold beams, but seemed, for once, to illuminate a path forward. With calm resolve, I shared with my doctor the growing fog in my mind, the dizziness that now punctuated my days. I carefully omitted the suspicions of betrayal for now, focusing instead on symptoms and feelings. He listened with patient concern, reviewing tests and prescriptions, his fingertips tracing the medical charts. I watched his eyes narrow as inconsistencies became clear. After a thorough reevaluation, he agreed to adjust my medications personally and reinstated a direct communication line with the pharmacy. It was a small victory, but it felt monumental. A formal corrective step encouraged by a trusted physician, the first sanction of my newfound agency. Returning home, the weight of this victory settled in my chest like a quiet storm. I was no longer adrift, but steering with purpose. I began organizing the documentation I had gathered over months, medication logs, comparison notes, correspondence, all neatly compiled into folders carefully labeled. Each paper was a testament to the vigilance I could no longer afford to suspend. The house itself became the backdrop of my efforts. The rooms, once cluttered with untouched memories and unquestioned trust, began to echo differently. I packed away precious keepsakes with care, photographs of David's childhood, letters from my late husband, mementos that had silently borne witness to the life Clara threatened to unravel. Each item was wrapped in soft tissue paper, tucked into sturdy boxes, a symbolic reclaiming of my past and future. I chose the smaller, more secure study as my sanctuary, a place where I could work undisturbed to plan and protect. In this quiet refuge, documents and notes spread like a map charting my path to justice. Amid the papers lay an unopened envelope containing legal documents Sophia had prepared in secret, a safeguard, a declaration that my home, my assets, and my rights were not targets for exploitation. Clara watched, though she did not understand the full extent of my preparations. Her anxiety grew thin and sharp, manifesting in restless nights and subtle glances over her shoulder. I sensed her growing awareness, the fragile confidence she once wore melting into discomfort. Her carefully rehearsed composure cracked with each of my deliberate steps. At times, I caught her watching me as I moved quietly through the house, organizing and securing. Perhaps she measured the futility of her schemes, sensing the tides had turned, yet powerless to stop the silent strength tightening around her. Despite the growing tension, I remained steady. I never hurried, never faltered. The temptation to confront Clara directly whispered in the background, but I silenced it. This was about control, not chaos. I would strike only when the foundation was unshakable. David remained the tender heart at the center, still unaware of the betrayal within his own family. I spoke with him gently, keeping the storm away from his view. His calls were lifelines, his voice a balm. I chose words that reassured, never revealing the depth of the shadows lurking beneath the surface. Protecting him was my silent promise. Meanwhile, I contacted Sophia more frequently, and together we consulted with experts who could quietly reinforce my position. Legal advice, financial counsel, and medical oversight formed a network of support I could rely on without exposing my hand. There was power in this quiet solidarity, a fortress built in the shadows as much as in the daylight. One evening, after meticulously ensuring medication receipts and records were cross-checked, I paused to look around my home. The familiar walls held a different meaning now. No longer simply the space of faded memories and whispered fears. It was a theater where silent justice was blossoming, a home I would defend fiercely. Some nights brought unrest, thoughts swirling like storm clouds around my resolve, but I reminded myself again, strength was found in silence. I greeted those moments not as defeat, but as fuel for what was to come. On one such night, a sharp knock startled the fragile quiet. Clara had returned early, unannounced. Her eyes darted nervously, betraying a desperation that no words could disguise. She sought to check on me, to assert control, but found a new force waiting. I met her in the living room, calm and composed. There was no need for confrontation, no sharp words or accusations, only the quiet confidence of one who no longer feared the shadows. "I'm fine," I said softly, and she hesitated, seeing in me a strength she did not anticipate. "But I've been seeing the doctor more regularly these days. I want a full review. It's time to make sure everything is as it should be." Clara's eyes narrowed, flickering with a mixture of defiance and fear. She tried masks of concern, whispers of care, but they rang hollow now. I did not offer her the glance of an enemy, but the calm of someone who holds the truth that no longer belonged to shadows. As she left that night, a silence fell heavier than before. I knew the game had changed irrevocably. The cracks in Clara's facade were growing, and the seeds of my careful, silent revenge were beginning to sprout. And all the while, the house stood witness, its walls holding the quiet battle of a mother reclaiming her home, her dignity, and her peace. The plan was unfolding, slow and sure, forged by years of resilience and tempered in silence. I was ready. In the quiet depths of night, I allowed myself the rare indulgence of hope. The long months of watching and waiting, of careful preparation, were beginning to shift the balance. I could feel it, not a thunderous roar, but the steady sound of justice taking root. The next steps would require the same measured patience and unyielding strength that had brought me this far. And I would face them with the quiet confidence of one who knows that true power lies not in volume but in control. The day Clara never expected arrived in the softest way possible, like the calm before a long-awaited storm. I waited, patient and steady, the weight of months of preparation resting light upon my shoulders. The evidence, the pill logs, the altered prescriptions, the notes documenting every suspicious change, were gathered and arranged meticulously before me. This was no longer a secret whispered in shadows, but a story ready to be told, a quiet truth begging to be heard. David arrived home late in the afternoon, tired and burdened, his face etched with worry. When he saw me, calm and composed in the living room, his brow smoothed slightly. He trusted me, as he always had. Over the years, I had been the beacon of stability in his life, the steady voice amidst chaos. Today, that role felt heavier, but no less vital. "There's something you need to see," I said softly, drawing him closer. I handed him the pill logs I had kept diligently. The numbers, the missing capsules, the disparities between what was prescribed and what I had been given. He turned the pages slowly, eyes widening with disbelief that crept into sorrow. "I didn't want to believe any of this," I confessed, voice steady but filled with the weight of years. "But it's here. All the evidence Clara hoped I wouldn't find. She altered my medications, David. She wanted me weaker, confused, silenced." His hands trembled slightly, fingers brushing over the neat rows of notes. The realization sank deep. The home we had built on trust was fractured by hidden betrayal. Yet even in that sorrow, there was a dawning clarity, a severe reckoning settling like cold water over his heart. The next step was inevitable, a confrontation that had been carefully planned and approached with caution. The medical board hearing was to be our ground of truth, a neutral arena where deception would be laid bare without the smoke of personal grievances. I walked into the sterile room not as a defeated soul, but as a woman armored with evidence and quiet determination. Clara sat across from me, her mask of concern barely holding, her eyes flickering with unease. The once assured facade was cracking, vulnerability surfacing beneath practiced calm. I presented the facts with careful precision. Every altered prescription, the withheld medications, the lies told quietly behind closed doors. My voice never rose into anger, instead steady and unwavering, carrying the strength of truth. Her protests were fragile echoes against the weight of evidence. The board listened, their faces calm, the gravity of the situation unfolding unmistakably. David stood beside me, silent support radiating from his presence even as emotions churned beneath. His eyes, cloudy with pain, held yet another emotion, an emerging respect for the mother who bore such burdens in silence and who now reclaimed her dignity publicly. As the hearing drew to a close, I spoke my final words with deliberate clarity, addressing not only the room, but the years of quiet suffering behind the pages of evidence. I was dismissed as frail and forgetful for too long, silenced by assumptions and deceit. This moment is not just a verdict, but a declaration that my strength has always been present, even when unseen. This house, my health, my life, they belong to me once again. The room seemed to hold its breath as the undeniable truth settled, the atmosphere thick with the weight of justice served quietly but decisively. Leaving the hearing room, the sunlight broke through gathering clouds, a silent herald of new beginnings. Clara's fall from grace was palpable, the shadows she had tried to command retreating from the light of exposed truth. David clasped my hands in a moment heavy with unspoken sentiment. "I see now," he murmured, "the strength you kept hidden all these years. Thank you for not giving up." The house awaited us, its walls bearing witness to the wounds and the healing, its rooms no longer places of silent fear, but sanctuaries of reclaimed peace. In my hands, the keys felt more than metal. They were symbols of power regained, a fortress firm against the past's betrayals. In the days that followed, I embraced a fragile liberation. Though the future remained uncertain, it was illuminated by an inner flame of justice and dignity, a steady beacon forged through years of resilience and quiet endurance. I had journeyed through darkness and emerged whole, no longer a victim, but a victor. In this reclaimed silence, I was the echo of survival and strength, a mother whose story would no longer be muffled or denied. The days that followed unfolded like a slow, steady dawn breaking over a long, dark night. The heaviness that had pressed against my chest lightened, releasing years of silent pain and tension. Our home, once a place where secrets and fear lingered in every corner, now basked in a fragile light of renewal. The air inside felt different, gentler, filled with the promise of healing. David was by my side more often, his presence a warm reassurance. We shared new conversations, ones tinged with cautious hope and the tentative building of trust. His eyes, once clouded with confusion and hurt, now reflected understanding and gratitude. The son who had been blinded by love and loyalty was beginning to see, truly see, the strength and resilience I carried quietly all these years. Clara had vanished from our lives, her departure as silent as the lies she once wove. The shadows that had crept through our home began to recede with her absence, leaving behind the warmth of reclaimed peace. I found comfort in the small rituals of daily life, the soft morning light spilling over my favorite chair, the aroma of freshly brewed tea, the tender laughter of grandchildren who filled the rooms with life and joy. Their laughter was a balm, stitching fresh hope onto old wounds. Even amidst this newfound tranquility, the lessons of betrayal and endurance were etched deep within me. I refused to let what happened fade into silence or shame. My journey had taught me that strength could be quiet, a steady force rather than a roar. That power could be found in patience, wisdom, and the courage to stand tall when unseen. I carefully crafted a new daily rhythm, one that honored myself and the life I had rebuilt. Each morning I greeted the day with gratitude, savoring small moments often overlooked: the gentle brush of sunrise through curtains, a kind word from family, the peaceful solitude of an afternoon spent reading or reflecting. My home was no longer a refuge from fear, but a sanctuary of renewal. Legal battles had settled, but their resolution was not marked by bitterness or anger. Thanks to Sophia's guidance, I ensured my estate and finances were secure, protected from anyone who might try to cruelly reclaim what was rightfully mine. Financial independence now stood as a fortress around my dignity, a final barrier no one could breach. What lingered most vividly was the silence, no longer heavy with despair, but vibrant, alive with resilience. That silent strength, once a quiet whisper, now sang through every fiber of my being. It was the sound of survival, of wisdom distilled through pain, a testament to a life lived fully despite trials. One particular evening, as the sky blushed with the gold of sunset, I stood by the window, gazing into my garden, the heartbeat of this place woven through every petal, every leaf. I whispered softly to myself, "I am the architect of my life, and now my silence sings not of surrender, but of strength." The words settled deep in my soul, a quiet anthem to the path I had traveled. The house, once a stage of deception and quiet despair, was now transformed. It embraced me, held me protectively, a home of honesty, hope, and healing. In its familiar walls I found freedom, the freedom to live without fear, to love openly, and to be wholly myself. And as night fell, wrapping the world outside in quiet darkness, I felt a peace unlike any I'd known before. The echoes of my past struggles were still present, but they no longer bound me. Instead, they sang softly of resilience, of a mother who reclaimed her story, her voice, her life, and whose silence now spoke volumes of enduring strength.